Trump's Persian gamble, regime change, strategic illusion, and the oldest American temptation in the Middle East. The moment of decision, in the early hours of a Saturday that may yet divide American foreign policy into a before and after, President Donald Trump did something no American president had dared to do since the Iranian Revolution of 1979. He ordered the direct decapitation of the Islamic Republic's leadership, the killing of Iran's supreme leader, executed under the Pentagon's dramatically titled Operation Epic Fury, was not merely another strike in America's long shadow war with Tehran. It was an attempt to rewrite the strategic grammar of the Middle East itself. In one stroke, Mr. Trump wagered that air power, technological supremacy and political audacity could succeed where diplomacy, containment, sanctions, and occupation had all failed. The bet is breathtaking on scale. If successful, Mr. Trump could claim a generational victory, the destruction of Iran's nuclear program and the collapse of the most durable anti-American regime in modern Middle Eastern history, achieved without American occupation forces trudging through desert cities. It would confirm a theory long cherished by interventionists and techno-strategists alike, that modern war can produce political transformation at distance. If it fails, however, the consequences may prove equally historic. A regional conflagration, spiraling retaliation, disrupted energy markets and renewed American entanglement could transform a presidency chose on promises to end forever wars into the architect of another. The irony is too neat. Mr. Trump returned to office pledging strategic restraint. Barely a year later, he has gambled his presidency, and America's geopolitical posture, on regime change in Tehran. The persistence of regime change. American presidents periodically rediscover regime change as though meeting an original idea, from Dwight Eisenhower's covert overthrow of Iran's prime minister in 1953 to George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq half a century later. Washington has repeatedly concluded that removing hostile governments offers a shortcut to stability. Each episode has been accompanied by confident predictions that local populations would welcome liberation and rapidly construct pro-Western political orders. History has been unkind to such expectations. Iran is the ultimate institutional survivor. The Islamic Republic has endured sanctions, isolation, cyber warfare, assassinations, and domestic unrest for 5 decades. It survived the Iran-Iraq War, waves of protest movements and sustained economic strangulation. Its governing system is not merely ideological but deeply bureaucratic, an ecosystem of clerical authority, security services, and patronage networks designed precisely to absorb shocks, by targeting the supreme leader. Mr. Trump has attacked the symbolic apex of that system. Yet symbols and systems are not identical. Removing one does not guarantee the collapse of the other. Indeed, analysts warn that leadership decapitation often strengthens regime cohesion rather than dissolving it. External attack legitimizes repression, suppresses factional rivalry, and transforms political survival into national resistance. America has learned this lesson repeatedly, in Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan. And America has rarely remembered it for long. Air power and political fantasy. Mr. Trump's clear theory of victory rests on a seductive proposition, that overwhelming air power can achieve regime collapse without occupation. Modern precision warfare encourages such thinking. Satellite-guided munitions promise surgical destruction. Intelligence networks find targets with algorithmic certainty. Military planners increasingly speak of effects-based operations, wars won by dismantling command structures rather than conquering territory. Yet political authority rarely evaporates under bombardment alone. NATO's campaign in Serbia in 1999 is often cited as proof that air power can force regime concessions. But Serbia had neither Iran's ideological mobilization nor its regional proxy networks. Iraq in 1991 endured devastating bombing yet kept Saddam Hussein's regime for another decade. Libya's collapse in 2011 required local militias to complete what Western planes began, and produced chaos rather than stability. As Mohammad Hafez of the Naval Postgraduate School bluntly sees, regime change traditionally demands boots on the ground. The uncomfortable implication is clear: if airstrikes do not trigger internal collapse, escalation becomes structurally unavoidable. The die, once cast, rarely rolls backward. Iran's counter-strategy. Tehran's likely response follows a logic opposite to Washington's hopes. Rather than confronting American forces symmetrically, Iran has incentives to widen conflict geographically while limiting direct confrontation. Retaliatory strikes against American allies, already reported across Bahrain, the UAE, and Qatar, suggest a strategy designed to internationalize costs. Iran cannot defeat the United States militarily. It can, however, destabilize oil markets, threaten maritime transit, and impose economic pain sufficient to reshape political calculations in Washington. The regime's survival strategy has long relied on asymmetry, proxy militias, missile deterrence, and economic disruption. By expanding conflict outward, Tehran shifts the battlefield from military dominance to political endurance. In such contests, democratic patience often proves the weaker resource. The MAGA paradox: the greatest uncertainty lies not in Tehran but in Ohio, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. Mr. Trump's political coalition appeared partly from exhaustion with foreign intervention. The MAGA movement defined itself against the bipartisan consensus that produced Iraq and Afghanistan. America first implied strategic retrenchment rather than expansion. A prolonged Middle Eastern conflict therefore risks ideological contradiction at the heart of Trumpism itself. Already, approval ratings have suffered amid domestic economic frustrations. Rising energy prices, an almost inevitable consequence of regional instability, could deepen voter dissatisfaction. Casualties, even limited ones, would sharpen divisions within the president's own base. Mr. Trump acknowledged the risk unusually candidly when warning that American heroes may be lost. The remark hinted at awareness that military glory and political durability do not always coincide. The president must now persuade skeptical supporters that this war differs fundamentally from those he once condemned. Governance by improvisation. Critics argue that the administration's greatest vulnerability lies in the absence of a clearly articulated end state. Mr. Trump launched the campaign without congressional authorization and without explicitly defining war aims. His later comments, suggesting the conflict might end within days or expand indefinitely, have reinforced feelings of strategic improvisation. Such ambiguity reflects Mr. Trump's broader governing style. Allies view unpredictability as leverage, opponents see it as instability. The same approach that enabled diplomatic surprises, including a Gaza ceasefire and increased European NATO spending, now governs decisions of war and peace. Foreign policy conducted through intuition can produce dramatic successes. It can also magnify miscalculation. Wars, unlike negotiations, rarely reward improvisation for long. Congress rediscovers its voice. Domestic opposition has appeared swiftly. Democratic leaders accuse the president of bypassing constitutional war powers. Kamala Harris has described the conflict as a war of choice, while Chuck Schumer criticized the administration's failure to present evidence of imminent threat. Even some Republicans express unease, reflecting lingering post-Iraq skepticism within conservative ranks. The result may be a dual conflict: military confrontation abroad accompanied by institutional struggle at home. House Democrats are already pursuing resolutions to restrict presidential authority, ensuring that Iran policy becomes central to the approaching midterm elections. American wars increasingly unfold simultaneously on foreign battlefields and domestic television screens. Allies and anxiety. For America's regional partners, the strike generates both relief and dread. Israel has long advocated decisive action against Iran's nuclear ambitions. Gulf states share fears of Iranian power yet remain acutely vulnerable to retaliation. Missile attacks against infrastructure or shipping lanes threaten economic lifelines upon which global markets depend. Saudi Arabia, whose rapprochement with Iran only recently stabilized regional tensions, now faces renewed uncertainty. Reconstruction plans for Gaza and broader regional normalization initiatives risk derailment amid escalating violence. Washington's allies therefore confront a familiar dilemma: dependence on American protection paired with anxiety over American escalation. The global economic shockwave. Oil markets stay the silent arbiter of Middle Eastern wars. Even limited disruption in the Gulf can reverberate globally through energy prices, inflation, and financial instability. For Mr. Trump, already facing voter frustration over living costs, economic fallout may prove politically more damaging than battlefield developments. Iran's leadership understands this leverage well. Strategic disruption offers asymmetric retaliation capable of shaping American domestic politics without direct confrontation. In an interconnected global economy, missiles fired near shipping lanes can influence elections thousands of miles away. Legacy at stake. Presidents often imagine foreign policy triumphs as the architecture of legacy. Franklin Roosevelt had victory in World War. Ronald Reagan claimed the Cold War's end. George W. Bush sought democratic transformation of the Middle East, and instead, became associated with protracted insurgency. Mr. Trump now seeks his own defining geopolitical achievement. Regime change in Iran would eclipse earlier diplomatic victories and redefine American strategic dominance. Failure, however, would attach his presidency to another cautionary chapter in America's long Middle Eastern entanglement. The stakes extend beyond policy into historical judgment. The aftermath problem. Even success poses daunting questions. Who governs Iran after regime collapse? How are competing factions held? What prevents fragmentation along ethnic, ideological or military lines? Recent history offers sobering precedents. Removing authoritarian regimes without constructing practical institutions often produces power vacuums filled by militias, extremists, or rival foreign powers. The administration has yet to articulate a post-Islamic republic framework. As one congressional aide noted bluntly, overthrowing a leader is easy, governing the aftermath is not. Victory in modern warfare increasingly begins the moment combat ends. America's recurring temptation. Mr. Trump's gamble reflects a recurring American temptation, the belief that decisive force can accelerate history toward favorable outcomes. The United States has unmatched military capability. What it lacks, repeatedly, is certainty about political consequences once regimes fall. Iran now becomes the latest testing ground for that paradox. The president may yet achieve the improbable: a weakened nuclear threat, internal Iranian transformation and strategic realignment across the Middle East achieved without occupation. Such an outcome would vindicate his unconventional instincts and silence critics who equate restraint with caution, but wars launched to avoid quagmires have an unsettling tendency to create them. Conclusion: the long shadow ahead. As the world watches Tehran's response, one reality becomes unavoidable. Mr. Trump has crossed a strategic threshold from which retreat may be impossible. Operation Epic Fury is not merely a military campaign. It is a referendum on whether 21st-century America can reshape adversarial regimes without repeating the traumas of Iraq and Afghanistan. The president has wagered that speed, shock, and technological dominance can substitute for patience and reconstruction. He has bet that domestic supporters will tolerate intervention undertaken in the name of ending future threats. And he has assumed that escalation can be controlled once started. History suggests caution, yet history has rarely discouraged presidents convinced they stand at decisive moments. Whether Mr. Trump appears as the architect of Middle Eastern transformation or the author of another American overreach will depend less on bombs already dropped than on events yet unseen, within Iran's fractured elite. Across volatile regional alliances and inside the American electorate itself, for now, the gamble stands, and like many of America's grandest strategic wagers, it begins with confidence, unfolds amid uncertainty, and may be judged not by intentions but by consequences measured years, or decades, hence.